Fire! We have a fire. Those were the words heard by a 12-year-old child, 2:30 in the morning. His fire was coming from his brother's bedroom. He fell off his bunk bed, ran to the door, paralyzed, not knowing what to do. Without hesitation, their stepfather ran from the bedroom, grabbed this trash can on fire, and single-handedly threw it out the bedroom window. Thank God the brother woke up, because this family was not prepared for an emergency. Not a single smoke detector or fire extinguisher in the house. No semblance of a plan of what to do in the event of an emergency. The 12-year-old kid, that was me. I was traumatized by this event for years. I couldn't sleep at night. I was in the local Boy Scout troop. Sought out every skill award, every merit badge I could find related to safety, emergency preparedness, life-saving, first aid. My sash was filled from my shoulder to my waist, my merit badges around my belt, and I still somehow didn't feel like I knew what to do. I joined the local volunteer fire department when I was 16. I got trained in firefighter 1, firefighter 2, pump operators. I got qualified to drive the rescue truck. I grew up in rural New York State. We went on a lot of ambulance calls, a lot of car accidents and medical calls, not a lot of fire calls. So I was still finding myself feeling helpless on these calls. Fast forward, I'm a sophomore at Syracuse University. I enrolled in the undergraduate biology program with aspirations of going to medical school. I found myself volunteering at the ambulance squad on campus, and there, going more than going to classes or studying. 5 years later, I graduate with a 2.4 GPA. My advisor says, "You're not going to medical school, son." But I certainly learned how to be an emergency responder. I took my basic EMT training. I was qualified to be a crew chief, a driver. They trained me as a dispatcher. So when I graduated, I said, well, this is a lot of fun. So I took a job with a local ambulance company in a town near where I grew up. I still wanted to do more, though, because I still didn't feel like I had all the skills I needed. So I enrolled in a local community college, technical college paramedic program. It was my passion. It was my calling, as my father used to say. He was a Presbyterian minister. I aced the program. Now I knew how to respond. I knew what to do on these calls. I had studied and memorized all the policies, all the procedures, all the protocols. I was now providing the highest level I could on these calls. And when you're a good clinician in EMS, somehow the higher-ups feel that that makes you a good supervisor, so they promoted me to be a supervisor. And then I went on to become a manager. Fast forward, 2003, I'm working at a hospital-based EMS service. I'm a manager, and my medical director comes to me and says, "Hey, we have to start this emergency management program. You're a manager, you work in emergency services, so that's a natural fit for you." I said, "Sure, boss, I'll take the job." I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Go to my favorite search engine on the computer, and I type in emergency management. And in the top list, I find International Association of Emergency Managers. I got to check this group out. So I go to the conference that year down in Orlando, Florida. I meet some great people like Bob Bowman, Pam LaRue. Start building some relationships. I go back. I start taking training courses. I start meeting people in the hospital. I'm now writing plans. I'm now writing an EOP, which I'd never done before. I'm training folks, designing exercises, and every once in a while we'd have to activate the hospital's command center, and I still felt a little out of my wheelhouse. Really not sure what to do. So I continued to do more community outreach. Got to meet some more people in the region, community partners, as they say. When we'd find ourselves with activations of the command center, I felt that I didn't have the best well-written plan with the I's dotted and the T's crossed, but I knew who to get to my table because they were the brains of the operation, not me. So it was through the relationships that I knew, and I can lean on those folks during times of response. Fast forward to 2011, the unthinkable happened. For those that work in healthcare know that declining CMS reimbursements, sharpening their pencils, I got laid off. Might resonate with some of you in the room today. If you've ever been let go from an organization that you gave 17 years of your blood, sweat, and tears to, it's devastating, it's demoralizing. Went into a dark place, but I had to work. I had a family to support. The next day I called an old EMS supervisor for a company I worked at, and I got a full-time job the next day. But now I was working for less pay, long hours to try to make ends meet. And I wasn't in emergency management anymore, so I wanted to get back in. So I went to an EMS conference that year. I ran into an old EMS chief. He says, dude, what's with the suit and tie? It's an EMS conference. I said, you never know when you're going to meet your next boss. Came to the IAEM conference that year, sought out somebody I had met in IAEM, Mike Mumaw. He read my resume, tore it apart, helped me rebuild it back up to something, polished it. I did some mock interviews. Yes, that's a plug for the career workshop. It's going on today. When I went back home, I sought out a colleague of mine that I had met when I was working at the hospital. I actually hired his small healthcare emergency management consulting firm to help me write a full building evacuation plan. I sought him out. 6 months later, I'm working for the company. It's the best job I've ever had in my career. So what's my message to you today? Why am I telling you this personal story? How can you power your career through relationships, whether you're in a good time or a bad time? Network, meet people. You have an opportunity this week, today, right in front of you. Take advantage of it. Don't just go home at the end of the week with a pocket full of business cards. Go home with a plan of what you're going to do with them. I have my pocket full of business cards of people I've met so far this week. On the back of my business cards, I write down a little story. What inspired me about that person, that conversation? What did I commit to do or to follow up with them? How am I going to remember this person? Because now I've got a good amount. I've got almost 10 business cards so far in my pocket. What's going to resonate with me about that person? Within a week or 2 weeks, do yourself a favor. Buy a pack of thank you notes and write a handwritten thank you note to that individual and follow up and continue to nurture that relationship. How do you nurture that relationship going forward? Number one, be on time to your commitments. Number two, be transparent. Number three, if you can't follow up, if you can't stick to number one and number two, learn, and this might be difficult, and a lot of folks have trouble with this, learn how to say I'm sorry. Learn how to apologize. Learn how to dive on the sword if you need to. I'm going to wrap up on a real quick personal story. 2 years ago, my sister was diagnosed with stage 4 melanoma, devastating illness. Prognosis was very poor. It's the same illness that took her father when she was 10 years old. She had a great outlook, a very positive outlook, despite the best medicine that we could afford and get, and we live in close proximity to New York City. My sister passed away in September of 2016, 1 month before the Savannah conference. Through the relationships that not just myself, but my brother-in-law, my family, we're like the Brady Bunch, there's a lot of us. Through the relationships that we built, we got through it. And that's when you cash in on those relationships. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you this morning.